Hello and thank you for joining us. You're listening to a Wedotalk with David Jaques. I'm always amazed at the quality of guests that are willing to talk to me here on this channel. I've had some incredibly multi-talented people, multifaceted people, and today's guest is no exception. It's a great honor to welcome to the Wedo platform Suzy Zenouzi, who is joining me from London. So, Suzy, a very good evening to you. Welcome to Wedo, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, David. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Suzy has a very diverse career, I'd almost say a very diverse life, which started out as a senior Middle Eastern consultant in the oil and gas industry, in which she would write macroeconomic publications and work with companies on positioning bids for energy contracts. After that, she was able to work with Tony Blair, Prime Minister Tony Blair, on the youth mentoring schemes as one of the people that worked on procedures and best practices for those schemes. And after that, she was called into the music industry and she worked on creating and promoting some pretty major artists, Jay-Z, Kanye West, to mention just a few. And today's business is Dragon Ley Lines that Suzy has founded, and she has studied the ancient art of dowsing, and she uses ley lines and earth energy lines as a holistic way of healing and well-being. So once again, a very, very multifaceted person. And Suzy, I'd love to hear about many of these different experiences that you're here to talk to me about today.
Thank you, David. How exciting. I appreciate the opportunity. Where would you like us to start?
So one of the questions I would have, and for me, I often look back and look at the who would have thought the what if prospect. And back, say, in the late 1990s, when I was starting working at a little company called PayPal that nobody had ever heard of, who would have known that it would have developed into what it is today? At that point, that's probably when you were working in the energy industry and doing these macroeconomic publications. If somebody had said to you that you would be studying ley lines and earth energy lines, what would you have said to them at that point?
Goodness, I had no idea what ley lines were. And I think for a lot of people, ley lines are, because they're the unseen energies, that mental transition into seeing the unseen can be quite challenging, particularly for people in the corporate space. I find creative people tend to be a little bit receptive. But that's a very interesting question for me because I spent a year in Egypt, actually, when I was studying my master's, and I had such phenomenal experiences in Egypt. But I almost feel like that time that I spent in Egypt was a time when I was so young and so fresh. And then later on in life, once I really started to understand more about ley lines and sacred sites and how they were built strategically on those spaces, I drew back on my experience and my memories of my time in Egypt, and it started to make a lot more sense to me. So I think in some ways I was a little bit there, but on a subconscious level, definitely not on a conscious level. And at that time, I think, to address your question, I would have been like, what are you talking about? What are these things? What does it even mean? I'm completely oblivious to ley lines at the time.
And of course, during that time between those two aspects of your career, you had a number of years in which you worked in the music industry. And am I right in saying that you did not deliberately go out to pursue a career in music and do the type of things that you did in the music industry? It kind of found you, didn't it?
It did, it did. I was actually, you touched upon the time that I was part of a team that was working on the good practice and procedures for the mentoring scheme. And through a mutual friend, I was asked if I could help hold an event for Jay-Z at the time. And I didn't come from the music industry. I hadn't any experience in events. I was completely a corporate person, you know, doing what I was doing. And so, but I've always had the personality of, well, I don't know, but I will try. Like, you know, how does this work? And so I did hold the event. I was capable of getting the event done as they wanted me to do the event. And that was my entry level into the music industry. That was, you know, a very fast and quick learning curve because, you know, he is single-handedly one of the pioneers of the music industry, particularly from the hip hop world. And so to have the privilege of working with him so early in, and as the first client, it was, you had to learn very quickly on your feet because everything had to be just so. But yeah, I mean, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity and the experience.
And that must have taken you to various places in the world. I would imagine you did a lot of traveling while you were doing that.
Actually, it's interesting because after that event and one event that slightly preceded that, but it was part of the same journey because they were very close in proximity, I became the person that they went to for events specifically in the UK and for other business opportunities across Europe. So for the best part of it, particularly on the event side, it was, well, this other artist is coming and this other artist is coming and we want another event and can we get this done? And then that changed and the nature of what I was doing changed, and that's quite a story in itself. But really at the beginning, I did end up traveling when the company shifted and started to take on more roles and more activities. But at that point on the event side, the focus was what I could deliver in the UK very specifically as the marketplace.
Great. And did you support events at some of the bigger festivals like Glastonbury?
So I wasn't ever really directly involved with Glastonbury in terms of the production and the booking side of things, but I definitely have worked with numerous artists that I was working with who were here to perform at Glastonbury, but my company was never affiliated with the booking process at Glasto or Wireless because they're such phenomenal outfits and they're so experienced in what they do. But what my events did do, because of the caliber of artists, is that I had a lot of media partner requests. So very quickly, and I guess this is why they're journalists, because they managed to find me. I'm like, remember, I didn't come from the music industry, so I wasn't somebody that was on anybody's radar at all. But very quickly, so the BBC World Service would want press passes, MTV Base, and even at one of the events, we had the senior executive director of the Financial Times who attended one of our events. And so my media partners and my relationship with the leading media partners in the UK grew very quickly because they wanted access to the events that we were holding and in particular to the artists that we were working with.
Wow, that must have been an amazing time and given you incredible exposure and experience to different things, but also a pretty stressful life, I would imagine, very fast-paced, very demanding.
Definitely stressful. And the logistics of an event is, particularly for that caliber of artist, is a lot. Security is a lot, making sure that everything is delivered in the appropriate way, making sure that we're managing hundreds, if not, thousands of people at a location, and having to work with the local police and the local council to just make sure that we've done all of our due diligence. It is, but it's worth it. It's great experience. And we've left small, tiny footprints in the sands of history. So that's quite an achievement for us.
And how long did you do that business? How long were you involved in that type of world?
So the event side on the music industry, I'm still involved, but so I'm very, I don't do the immediately they come to me and they want events. I seek alternative opportunities, more corporate opportunities. I'm still actually involved in that space, but we transitioned out of that and macro focusing on events. And we were asked by the people that we were working with to actually start participating more on the marketing, radio and TV plugging side of things. And so we transitioned out. And to be fair, the event side is very male heavy. And I was quite happy to transition out of being hands-on at the events and being situated more with the media partners. And also the impact that we had as radio and TV pluggers was by far more profound in terms of helping nurture the careers of emerging artists and existing artists and keep creating that sustainability and that conversion for them with regards to their assets and their content. So it was a nice transition. I really welcomed that transition from events into the marketing side of things.
And then one big question I'd have is, how does somebody go from the music industry and promoting all of these events and being in this world, which is a very fast-paced world, to what you're doing today, which is studying earth energy, sacred places? That's not a transition that happens overnight. How did that happen for you?
So it's been 10 years, if not leading up to 11 now. And I think it was an awakening of sorts. It was a personal spiritual journey. And it was just the desire. I've always been an avid student of life. And so I've read tremendously. And in my readings, I've chanced upon information that's been very transformative for me. And I wanted to share that those gems, those pearls, those experiences with other people. And for me, also the pace of the music industry is very different. The tempo of the music industry is very different. It's all very, very intense. And I just needed that balance as a human being myself, you know, away from that intensity. And so it really was relevant to me to have that balance of spirituality, of connection with the earth, of understanding that the purpose of our existence and why we're here and our ancestral lineage and what we've done over the time that we've been here and why we've built in certain spaces. And so for me, it's been quite a journey, and it allowed me to have balance, to be able to really have balance between what I'm doing for a living and my work and my corporate life, and who I am and what I need, and how I can be nurtured and how I can connect with the earth and have a deeper understanding of what these spaces are about. It was great for balance. It's gradual though. It wasn't, you know, I didn't wake up one day and go, that's it, ley lines. I'm going to, you know, spend 3 years just researching ley lines.
So, Suzy, many of the people listening may not be familiar with ley lines and earth energy lines. Would you give us just a summary and overview of what exactly do they represent? How would you best define them to somebody that is not familiar with this concept?
Absolutely. So where the tectonic plates in the earth have gaps, there is an energy that comes through those gaps into the earth that's tremendously profound. Ley lines have been identified. I mean, there's multiple energies that come through the earth, and it's not just the ley lines, but I'm going to focus for the purpose of this just purely on the ley lines. So they've been identified as lunar and solar. So some of them have more of a masculine energy, and some of them have a feminine energy. But the best way to identify ley lines, if you know nothing about ley lines, is to literally track sacred sites, ancient sites, churches, cathedrals, mosques, and you'll find that the chances are that the most prevalent ones, like the Vatican, like St. Paul's Cathedral, like the pyramids of Giza, you know, and we could go strategically around the world, all of these places have been built on earth energy lines, and they're powerhouses, and they've been built with a precision and attention paid to the light sound frequency convergence per square meter in order to be activated by those energy centers that are there underneath the earth's crust. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very helpful. I've done a little bit of research myself, so I think I already had that concept, but I know that many people listening would not really understand. And I also know that you have studied dowsing, which some people I think would call water divination. What is that ancient art about, and how have you been able to learn from that? So
the main way that ley lines are identified is through dowsing, which is water divining. And I was very lucky to be able to attend a dowsing course with Maria Whitley, whose father is Dennis Whitley, and she's a second generation master dowser. And it's interesting because I had done years of research into the space. And of course, dowsing is the way to identify all of the energy centers. But when I went to attend this 2-day course with Maria, I really realized that I had to just scrap everything I thought I knew and start all over again. But she is such a wealth of knowledge, and she's so amazing. And it was phenomenal, like such a phenomenal experience. And, you know, our bodies are a dowsing machine. We can ask questions of ourselves and get answers from the self. And of course, the dowsing with the rod or the pendulum is just an extension of the knowledge that you have within you. So for example, the pendulum would be used for remote information. So if somebody wanted to track their heritage, for example, they could use the pendulum on a map to find out where grandma came from and, you know, all of the ancestors. The rod dowsing is much more specific to land. For example, if I left the house and walked and came back, I would leave an energy trail, and the dowsing rod would track my last energy trail. So with the dowsing rod, you can do tracking, you can actually find water, you can find resources. But the real point is that the rod and the pendulum are just you. I mean, the information is already within you. It's inside you. You're just using these devices to access information that isn't available on the conscious level, but it's there within you, regardless.
Yeah. And one of the things, my own personal experience, I feel very drawn to water. I love the beach, I love the ocean, and not from the aesthetic side of what people think of, the beach for whatever activities. I just love taking a long walk along anywhere where there's water, river, lake, any body of water, the ocean. I always feel a sense of peacefulness at the ocean. Is that anything to do with earth energy?
Definitely. So we've established scientifically that water is conscious. And obviously we have a large volume of water, and particularly inside our brains. And so the ley lines themselves have water that is running beneath them. And where two ley lines cross is where we have the holy wells that we all know of, because there's always a holy well somewhere. And so this water comes out from the crossing of the ley lines and has phenomenal energy. There are spaces that we're aware of that people go and bathe in, and they feel phenomenal. One of those places is the White Springs at the bottom of Tor in Glastonbury, which is guarded by the High Priestess. And phenomenal spaces, but definitely. So we've got multiple different bodies of water that we're familiar with. We've got our oceans, we've got the water that's beneath the earth, and then obviously we've got the water that comes from the sky. But however the water comes to us, it's very conscious, and it's completely aware, and is carrying a tremendous amount of information. So I'm not surprised that when you have your beautiful walks by the bodies of water, that you have this sense of calm and connection, because we are water, but there is a real consciousness in the body of water that's profound.
And Suzy, what are the sort of practices that you use these days? I know that you have your company Dragon Ley Tours, which is your current business. You're actually helping people with more holistic well-being by appreciating these aspects of life. How do you do that? What are some of the journeys that you take people on, and how have you helped people with that?
So it was interesting that on the dowsing course, Maria informed us that although the sacred sites, summer solstice, which is coming up very soon, and winter solstice is a major gathering around Stonehenge, and deemed as an activation time of the year, the planetary alignments, and indeed it is, but actually these spaces are far more activated based around the moon cycles. And this is because we're going back to the water, because the moon has an impact on water. And actually the megaliths that are strategically placed on these ley lines, they go into the earth quite far down, and they also stand up. And in the megaliths is crystals. And so these megaliths are like our ancient Wi-Fi system. They communicate with each other underground. They communicate with each other overground. The people in Wiltshire, where the megaliths are concentrated, have actually worked hard to not have the 5G towers go up because of the interference it would have with the megaliths and the information that's being transmitted. But I have had the privilege of taking a large volume of people to sacred sites on day trips or retreats, and the feedback has always been phenomenal. And for me, I take them, I show them how to douse, they identify the energy, and then I really just leave them to connect. I don't have a very stringent, we're now going to do yoga for an hour, because they're so overwhelmed when they arrive and when they start to sense this beautiful energy. And it's amazing, particularly when I take people to Avebury, which is the largest stone circle in the world. There is a megalith that will talk to everybody. People just naturally just are drawn to a specific megalith. And very quickly, you'll find them hugging, caressing, laying their face. I mean, it's a real relationship. It's a real experience. And it's just so natural. And it doesn't matter where they're from, what their background is. They could be corporate, they could be music, they could be creative. once they arrive at the space and they feel the energy, there is a really deep, profound connection between people and those spaces, particularly during the moon cycles when they're activated.
Yeah. And one of the things which I think you know is very important to me is mental health and well-being, and any practices that you can use which are holistic and natural are a huge benefit. But one question I'd ask, and I know that you're not a physician, you're not a doctor, but how do these practices augment and complement modern medicine?
So I can speak to this, and as you said, I'm not an expert, and I'm not saying that this is an answer. People should be keeping balanced and seeking all solutions to a problem, but there is definitely a physiological response that happens when you go onto these earth energy centers. There is a muscle behind the eye that starts to contract. Then you start to feel a contraction around the temples. And then there is a feeling of an opening up on the crown and a pouring in of light. Now, this is scientifically all being proven that this is the response when people are on the ley. It could be quite subtle. It may happen very quickly. For some people, it happens slowly. But what also happens is that all of the senses start to get heightened. So your vision and your speech and everything starts to get very heightened. But ordinarily, when a human being is in that state, they are experiencing some level of fear. Some of the organs have closed down in order to get them into fight or flight mode so that they can escape a situation. That's why the senses become so heightened. You're hearing, oh my God, what's that noise? Your vision, everything, and all of the simulation goes into those senses. But the difference between this and that is that there is a feeling of groundedness, calmness, stability, no level of anxiety, but yet your senses are incredibly heightened. And this tends to last for people around 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the individual. And they always say to me, I feel amazing. I can see everything. I can see the colors. And it really is cleansing and healing, because to be able to feel grounded and stable, to be able to feel that you can really see everything around you and you can make choices with stability without any level of anxiety is, I think, something that we are seeking. Yeah. So I would definitely recommend the experience. For me, it has allowed me to transform as a human being. Yeah. It has allowed me to evaluate and to mostly and importantly to manage like scenarios that would traditionally make me very anxious. And it's also allowed me to question where my anxiety is stemming from. And because it's all a physiological experience on the ley lines, it's allowed me to really understand my physiological responses. Where does my anxiety start? My anxiety tends to start in the solar plexus. So because I've become quite sensitive now, I feel it very quickly, and then I can address, well, what am I doing? What is the circumstances around me that are starting to create this anxiety? And being very clear with myself and taking accountability for myself and knowing that I can't change anything around me. I definitely do not want to change the people around me, but I definitely should address myself and how I'm proceeding forward in order to not be anxious about what is going to happen next. And sometimes a level of anxiety is necessary because we're excited, and that the unknown can create anxiety. So to be able to distinguish between anxiety, which is about something new and exciting and something that we're venturing into, but anxiety that is genuine anxiety where your body is telling you, I don't want to do this. This is not good for us. These are all really subtle, but in time you get to really hear your body speak to you. And I believe the ley lines actually accelerate that process of knowingness of ourselves as well.
And one of the people I'll quote, I don't remember her name, but I did listen to an interview recently with a doctor of pain management from University Hospital in San Francisco. And one of the things that she said, it was just one line that she repeated a few times, and it just made such an impact on me. The mind and the body are connected 100% of the time. And that is something I think that we often overlook. We look at the mental side, the anxiety, the stress level. We look at the physical side and we think that they're two different things, but they're very connected, aren't they?
They do. You know from your body. Your body will give you every single sign. I mean, for different people, it lands in different places. Some people, it's the chest, it tightens up. Some people get it in the throat. They feel the tension in the throat. But I would say just listen to your body speak to you. Your body is the best radar for you because it's always trying to like guide you into the healthier and the right spaces, and also like pay attention to what you're doing, what you're participating in when the signals start to come. You know, be brave enough to really just look at yourself and stand and address the scenarios, because that is so important. You know, we can catch some of these things quite early and we can address them quite early if we learn to listen to our own selves, our own bodies, and the signals that get triggered, you know, inside our system.
Yeah. I don't know whether you may know, but I have been a marathon runner, distance runner. That's one of the things that on a mental level has kept me stable through much of my adulthood. And I've spent a lot of time in very deep, very intense marathon training, which is very physically demanding. I also find it very healthy because I tend to sleep better, I eat better, I exercise a lot, and it keeps me very well balanced. But the one thing that I did learn, and I learned by mistake, was what you just said. Listen to your body, because sometimes your body tells you it's time to slow down, it's time to take a break, it's time to reassess. And if you just keep on going at that pace, whether it's a work pace, whether it's a physical pace, whether it's a sport, you can come to some harm. So you just have to listen to that and realize that it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have to take some kind of a break, or you have to recalibrate or rebalance what you're doing.
Absolutely. For me, it's really about that balance that you've just touched on. It's about being diligent in the workspace, you know, knowing about your timelines and delivering at the highest level that you possibly can. But at the same time, knowing when you need that time to go for the walk, to go and get amongst nature, to go for the walk by the beach or the body of water, whatever it is that feels like the right thing for you, then do that. Like, know how to take that time out and have your you time. You know, don't go to burnout mode, because, you know, have that balance. Things can wait. And I, you know, when I was going back to the music industry, in the first 3 years that I was working, David, I was available 24/7. And because a lot of my clients were based out of America, the timelines were really inconvenient for me. So it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And I'm here and I'm, you know, and then I have to wake up and deal with the UK side of things. And then my phone is ringing all the way on the US side of things. And for the first 3 years, it was 7 days a week, every hour of the day. And I hit burnout and I just became really demotivated, and I had to set boundaries, you know, and I had to say, no, don't phone me at 3, 4, you know, the time difference, right? You've flown to the UK before, you know, it's 2 a.m. unless we're actually doing something tomorrow or the day and it's an emergency and we need to speak. Please take me into consideration and my team into consideration. And, you know, setting boundaries as well, and learning very quickly that unless, again, we had events or we had deadlines, we are not working on the weekend. We deserve to have our weekends with our families and our loved ones, and just to have that distance, because when you give yourself the time to step away, you come back a lot more efficient. You do come back when you give yourself the opportunity to charge and to step away from it, because the music industry is really intense. It's a lot of work. It's a very demanding space. So you need to be able to step away from it or allow yourself to breathe, to recoup, to recharge, and then you can come back and you're far more effective and efficient.
So, Suzy, thanks for all of your thoughts on all of this. It makes a lot of sense in whatever walk of life you may be in. But one thing I'd like to touch on is something that you did a number of years ago when you were working on the youth mentoring schemes under Tony Blair, Prime Minister Tony Blair. Tells me that youth and young people is something that's very important to you. Would you tell us a little about the work that you did there and the impact that you might have had on young people?
Absolutely. I still do a lot of work with young people. I'm very passionate about our future, which is the young ones. And so the mentoring schemes at the time, we were writing the good practice and procedure, and the dropout rate of 13, 12 to 15, 16-year-olds was really high, and we needed to address that problem. And so the idea was, and what we did do, was to find a mentor within the industry of interest to the young person, and that mentor in that corporation would stay with the young person for the period of a year. And they would help them understand what those subjects and staying committed to education could lead to from a practical perspective of, so if you study mathematics, then you can become a scientist, or and so we interfaced with senior executives in the various different verticals of corporations, head teachers, headmasters, and we interviewed a lot of young people to see what would be of value. And based upon those conversations, we created the good practice and procedure. I unfortunately wasn't in the completion process because I transitioned out and I went into the music industry. But what that did do for me is allowed me to work over the years with young people and really understand some of the problems that they face and how we could nurture them. Of course, the mentoring schemes have changed tremendously now. The idea then was to really pair up a student with a corporate executive, and for that corporate executive to share their story of how they went from school to college or whatever that journey was, because, whatever that was, in order to inspire the young person to stay in education and to be able to also transition into a workplace that was going to be beneficial to them. But now the mentoring schemes have changed. I still am happy that they're out there. I think they're important, and I think children benefit tremendously from being able to pair up with people that have got experience. But God, that was a million years ago, David. Things have changed so much. Yes.
And the world of work has changed so much, and any mentoring that might have been done, say in the 1990s when you were early 2000s, maybe when you were doing that type of work, is probably not as relevant today. And what we're seeing is a tremendous shift in the workplace. People are doing less of the long corporate career, which is, you and I have both exited out of large corporate work and gone off and done a lot of different things. And there's a lot more fluidity in the workplace. So a question to you would be, if you were talking to a young person today and they were saying, I'm really not sure what I'm doing in my career, or I have this career right now, what type of advice would you give them for the future? If you had to give them a few pointers as to where to go with their life, what would you tell them?
So that's interesting, because I literally had this conversation on Monday gone. I was asked to attend as an alumni for Edinburgh University to meet with some young graduates. And we had this conversation. And I think my takeaway, what I would recommend is to not experience fear. There is no such thing as failure. Seize opportunities. And be confident, know that, you have studied, but now you're making that transition into the workplace and you're not going to have any experience, and that's okay. Just be very diligent, pay attention, and just do your best. Your best is your best, and you will learn if you apply yourself, and if the people around you can see that you're applying yourself and you're diligent. Everybody's had a beginning. None of us were born with experience. We've had to acquire experience. It's a little bit unnerving when you're making that transition, but just be confident and just, apply yourself and don't shy away from the challenges. Take the challenges and gain your experience. That was the advice. And they were all very, very pleased because they were nervous. They were like, well, I don't know what the expectation of me in the workplace is. Such a big world out there. And I'm like, look, everybody, even the senior executives had a beginning, and everybody understands, and we're here to nurture you, and people will be, even for me in the music industry, I've been mentored throughout all of my careers. There are always people that are kind enough to share information and to help you process that transition. And, and I'm sure that everybody will get into a space where people will mentor them, help them and aid them, but just ask for the help as well if necessary. Sometimes people feel that they should go in and they should know everything and it should be a given, and it doesn't have to be a given. Seek help and assistance and advice. People will help you. People have helped me tremendously.
And that's such great advice, not just for somebody starting out in their career or a young person, but throughout your career. And what if you are 10 years into the workforce, 20 years into the workforce, you're a little confused as to where you want to go, what you want to do, you need a sounding board. there's somebody out there that will help you. The power of networking, knowing people, having people to help you, having that sense of community is phenomenal. And I think many people, it's very easy to put a little bit of a downer on ourselves and say, well, nobody's really going to want to help me. Nobody's going to be interested in me. My problems are very unique. Nobody really understands, so I won't even bother asking. But that's the absolute wrong way to go about it. That's the wrong approach altogether. If you ask somebody, they probably will help you. And I think you'll be surprised at how willing people are to help.
I totally agree. I think at the heart of our existence, we want this sense of belonging. We have a real draw to sense of community, and we want to nurture and help each other. I think everybody wants to nurture and help everybody, all of us. And where we can help, we will. And where we need help, we should seek, because it's innately within our nature to want to help and assist. We've all needed help. And I think it's hard sometimes, depending on what the circumstances are, to just confide in someone and to ask. But I would say do it. I would say do it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yes, absolutely. Great words of advice. And Suzy, this has been wonderful to hear all of these experiences that you've been through in your lifetime and some of these wonderful things you've done. And two questions for you before we wrap up. What does the future hold for you, and how can people contact you?
So I'm back in the music industry, and I'm still very much moving forward with Dragon Ley Tours as well. And so it's exciting for us to be able, and we're merging the music industry with the holistic tours for high-level artists who struggle a lot with social media and personal attacks, and they need that nurturing as well. So we're looking at ways of expansion with Dragon Ley Tours. We're still very firmly in the music industry. And David, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I feel very honored to have this opportunity to speak to you. And the best way to reach me, we've never been, public facing, but the best way to reach me is by emailing me at info at Mojona, Mojona.com. And we will receive that and respond.
Great. Suzy, once again, thank you for your time today, for sharing all of your thoughts. It's been great chatting to you, and I'd love to keep in touch and follow your developments in the future, because I think they're going to be very exciting.
Thank you, David. And also, we're here to assist. If there's anything that we can do and my network can do that can be of value or help, please don't hesitate. And thank you again.
Great, thanks. And thank you everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and this conversation with Suzy. If you'd like to leave your comments below, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you next time. We upload a Wedo Talk every week, so if you enjoyed this one, please subscribe and leave your comments below.